At one time it was possible in Cornwall to tell someone's job by their clothes. This applied particularly to the fishing and mining industries. The fishwives were women who either packed fish in salt in barrels or who carried fish around town to sell from door to door. They carried the fish in large baskets called coals. These ladies wore either tartan shawls or red cloaks and large black felt hats with a white underbonnet or padded ring. The handle of the basket was worn over the hat with the basket on their back. The basket was also supported by a straw stuffed cushion tied under the skirt at the back to take the weight of the cowl. This was very heavy when filled with fish. On their feet they wore either leather-topped wooden-soled shoes or sandals. These were something like slippers and made entirely of leather. Several of the fishwives became very famous. For instance, Mary Kalinek, who at the age of 80 years walked to London to see the Great Exhibition and talk to the Queen. Dolly Pentreath, who was famous because of her knowledge of the Cornish language. The Cornish fishermen were painted again and again by the painters of the Newton School, and they became very famous. People began to come and see them, and an industry grew up making souvenirs like postcards and plaster statues, etc. In recent times, these striking clothes have been used as traditional costume. For the fishermen, a lovely description survives from the times. For strong weather, heavy leather sea boots reaching to the thigh, an oilskin coat and sou'wester hat. Underneath, a thick guernsey frock and heavy flannel underclothes. For fine weather, half boots, leather and reaching up to mid-calf, blue serge trousers and a white dungaree frock and peaked cap. This picturesque style of dress was akin to uniform. The dungaree frock we would now call a fisherman's smock. The Guernsey knit frock was a very special knitted garment. The pattern of a knit frock was special to each village and learned by heart by each knitter. Guernsey knitting was a cottage industry in Cornwall. Whole families knitted, with the little ones knitting the trails, the older girls the plain parts, and mothers the fancy knitting stitching. The initials of a man were often knitted into the bottom corner. Can you guess why? Bal maidens worked at the surface of the mines in Cornwall, tin, copper and china clay mines. They wore a very distinctive costume, clogs, white apron and a sacking trouser apron to keep the white one clean, and the gook. A gook is a bonnet of white linen in summer and darker, coarser linen union fabric in the winter. The girls thought the white ones were really more flattering. The gooks were different for every area or large mine and were very beautiful and distinctive. The girls were mostly young, starting at 6 or 7 years and gradually learning job as they got older. They were famous for singing as they walked, often several miles to work. A famous Cornish historian, A.K. Hamilton Jenkin, described the Bal maidens as clean, neat and very particular about their appearance. Others were more critical, as the girls often spent their money on more fashionable clothes for the weekend, just like you, wearing your uniform to school and more fashionable gear at the weekend. An eminent mining engineer of the time, 1870 this is, George Seymour, drew some lovely pictures of the girls at his mine on Friday and on a Saturday. Once again, these very beautiful costumes are now often worn by Cornish dancers. Miners. These men and boys worked in a very dangerous job underground in hot, wet and dirty conditions. In the early days, they would wear old clothes to work and walk back home in them. Later, pithead baths were installed. Here is a picture from George Seymour. And then the men wore a sort of uniform. Coarse drill jackets and trousers, hobnail boots without socks, and a resin hardened felt hat. The hat was not like a modern helmet, such as you wear when riding your bike, but was made of felt, soaked in something very like varnish. The bottom of the heavy wooden-soled boots, known as clogs, were studded with nails in a particular pattern to prolong the life of the boots and help the miners feel grip on slippery surfaces. Clothes were very expensive, so the miners' own clothes were very valuable to them. We get an idea of what they wore at home from a court case in 1858. William Walsh stole one cloth coat, one cloth trousers, one cloth waistcoat, one Guernsey frock, 2 shirts, 1 necktie and 1 pocket handkerchief. He was sentenced to 2 months' hard labour.